Wheat, one of the world's most vital crops. It has contributed to the rise and fall of empires, nourished nations, and influenced the destinies of people and countries. It fueled wars, made peace possible, and opened new roads. From ancient times to the turbulent era of Hitler and the Holocaust, from the Silk Roads and the Crusades to the present-day Ukraine and Russia, wheat has been one of the most important elements of human civilization. Today, I'll discuss the story of wheat. Welcome to the World and Me project with Dr. Eva Alexanian. Your likes, subscriptions, and comments help us tremendously. So please, press the like button, subscribe to our channel, and share our videos. You could also visit our website at www.worldandme.info and read articles related to subjects covered in our posted videos. Wheat is staple food for billions of people around the world. From timeless classics like bread and beer to countless other products, wheat has been at the heart of human diets for centuries. Wheat's origins lie in the Fertile Crescent, a region now spanning parts of Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Jordan. From the Fertile Crescent, wheat trade spread to the other parts of the world, including Europe, Asia, and Africa. Wheat became the backbone of many ancient civilizations. Take ancient Egypt, for example. Thanks to Nile's nutrient-rich floods, Egypt became a wheat powerhouse. This abundance allowed Egypt to support a large population and a powerful state. Wheat was also used as a form of currency and was essential in trade, helping to build the wealth of the Egyptian empire. But this abundance was a double-edged sword. It eventually attracted Rome's attention. Wheat was one of the main reasons behind Roman Empire Augustus' attack on Egypt and the Battle of Actium. With Egypt under Roman rule, it became the empire's breadbasket, supplying the wheat that kept Rome's citizens content and growing. Ancient Rome's population soon exploded as it became a powerful empire. Egypt's generated wealth allowed the Roman emperors to personally pay the legions and keep a large army. So this is why some say Augustus went to Egypt as a general and returned as an emperor, with Egypt's wheat essentially acting as Rome's giant piggy bank. In fact, the Roman Empire relied on wheat to keep the masses happy using the annona. The annona, or grain dole, was a system of providing free or subsidized grain to Roman citizens. This welfare program helped prevent food shortages and riots, ensuring political stability. But Rome's dependence on distant wheat supplies made it vulnerable to pirates and poor harvests. When Rome faced grain shortages due to wars, piracy in the Mediterranean, or poor harvests, it led to economic distress and social unrest, contributing to the empire's eventual decline. So that famous phrase, bread and circus, reflects how essential the grain dole was to maintaining public contentment and political control. Basically, disruptions in the grain supply led to economic chaos and social unrest, sowing the seeds of Rome's decline. And Rome wasn't alone. The Byzantine Empire also heavily depended on wheat, especially from Egypt and Anatolia. Control over these wheat-producing areas was crucial for the empire's food security. But when the Muslim Arab armies conquered Egypt in 641 AD, the Byzantines lost their most valuable wheat sources. This loss significantly weakened the Byzantine Empire's ability to feed its population and sustain its military campaigns. The shortage of grain led to economic strain and diminished the empire's capacity to resist further Arab advances, contributing to the gradual decline of Byzantine power in the eastern Mediterranean. The Byzantines had to find alternative sources of grain, and they turned to regions like the Black Sea and the Balkans, Danube area, to make up for the shortfall. That turned out to be too expensive. This change in grain supply sources had economic and demographic consequences for the Byzantine Empire. The empire suddenly started experiencing a significant population drop in the cities. People in the cities were forced to hit the road and seek a living in the countryside where they could produce food themselves. This became the beginning of the end of Byzantine Empire. By the time of the Ottoman siege of Constantinople in 1453, the Byzantine Empire was already severely weakened, with much of its former territory, including vital wheat-producing regions, lost to the Ottomans. The loss of these territories meant Constantinople was increasingly isolated and unable to secure sufficient food supplies, including wheat. So with most of its wheat-producing lands gone, Constantinople couldn't sustain itself against a prolonged siege. The city's food shortage became the final nail in the coffin, marking the end of Byzantine Empire and a dramatic shift in region power. A similar story involving wheat unfolded in the Ottoman Empire and many other empires throughout history. But wheat did not just weaken empires. It also built and weakened entire systems. First, the loss of cheap wheat pushed Europe from bustling cities of classical era straight into the feudal age. So from high urbanization of classical era to the low urbanization of feudal age. Later, the feudal system itself was once again shattered because of wheat. How? In the early 14th century, Europe got hit with non-stop rain and cold, causing massive crop failures, including wheat. So began the Great Famine of 1315-1317. Wheat stocks dwindled, prices increased drastically, leading to widespread hunger. The famine weakened the population, making them more susceptible to diseases like Black Death, which struck Europe later in the century. The famine also had significant social and economic impacts, contributing to unrest and weakening feudal structures. Turns out medieval Europe was basically a house of cards stocked on wheat, and one bad harvest could send the whole thing crashing down. Centuries witnessed slavery, wars, and famine, all related to the struggle for control over this essential crop and its trade routes. The loss of wheat sources often led to strategic disadvantages, economic hardship, and ultimately the downfall of powerful empires, armies, and societies. But in this video, I won't delve into the distant past for appropriate examples. Instead, I'll explore the modern era's dark side of the struggle for wheat control, the way Peter Frankopan portrays in his Silk Roads. In August 1939, a message was passed to Hitler. He scanned it, stared into space for a moment, flashed deeply, then banged on a table so hard that the glasses rattled. He turned to his guests and said excitedly, "I have them. I have them." After the meal, Hitler called his dinner guests together and told them that the paper he was holding contained the text of a reply that he had been waiting for from Moscow. Stalin had agreed to sign a treaty of non-aggression. 2 days after Stalin's reply, the German delegation was headed to the Kremlin to meet with Stalin and Molotov. Now Hitler was convinced that he had found a way to protect Germany's future. One particular area of weakness for Germany was the inadequacy of domestic agriculture. As German war machine began to be assembled, it drained resources, time, and money. As a result, the agricultural sector suffered greatly. Germany remained heavily dependent on imports because home production was unable to meet Germany's self-sufficiency needs. Hitler believed he held the answer: Ukraine. Ukraine, or rather the fruit of its rich fertile soil, fell into Hitler's grasp with the signing of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Non-Aggression Pact in 1939. This pact outlined not only spheres of influence between the Soviet Union and Germany, but also the volumes and prices for Soviet exports to Germany, including wheat, oil, and other crucial materials. Stalin was effectively fueling Hitler's war machine, feeding Germany and emboldening him to invade Poland. But as goods and materials flowed into Germany following the invasion of Poland, negotiations with the Soviet Union grew increasingly tense, particularly regarding the imports of wheat and oil. Stalin personally dictated the timing and volumes of shipments. This caused an anxiety among Nazi planners. Such situation became a concern for the German Foreign Office. Overdependence on Moscow posed the biggest threat to Hitler's European conquest. It was this sense of unease and uncertainty that would culminate in the decision costing the lives of not only millions of German soldiers, but also millions of Soviets, Jews, and other nationals. It was the decision to invade the Soviet Union. By the summer of 1941, Berlin shops bore empty shelves, and the scarcity of vegetables became a stark reality. Unstable prices and the thriving black market fueled unease among the population, gradually leading them to question the benefits of German expansion. Of course, this made Hitler's propaganda chief quite nervous. Hitler believed that oil fields and the fertile soils of Soviet Union and especially Ukraine held the solution to Germany's problems. Seizing control of the fertile plains stretching from Black Sea to the Caspian Sea was seen as a path to free Germany from every economic pressure. By securing the parts of the Soviet Union with immense riches, Germany would become invincible. I want to mention once again that it was not just wheat that Hitler was after when invading the Soviet Union. Hitler also needed Soviet Union's oil reserves to fuel German tanks, airplanes, and so on. Nonetheless, wheat was a big part of this picture. Shortly after the invasion, an article published in Germany explicitly stated that the war had been initiated for grain and bread for a well-stocked breakfast, lunch, and dinner table. Germany's war aim was clear, the capture of vast fields of East where golden wheat swayed enough, or rather more than enough, to nourish our people and all of Europe. But as we know, the invasion into the Soviet Union didn't go according to the German plan. They encountered serious supply problems right from the start. The idea of seizing an apparently bottomless pool of resources in the East turned out to be an illusion. Despite territorial gains, the German campaign in the East didn't provide what they had promised and desperately needed. This marked the beginning of a severe shortage of wheat, leading to a series of catastrophic events. In the face of looming food shortages and famine, the German authorities made a chilling decision. They began selecting individuals who would bear the brunt of this impending catastrophe. The victims in line were Russian prisoners, basically Soviets, Poles, Romans, and of course Jews. And so began a sequence of events that witnessed an unprecedented scale of horror. Human beings were treated like livestock, divided into those who would be subject to grueling slave labor and those whose lives were deemed unexpendable. The second group had to pay the price for the survival of others. In September 1941, food supplies were withdrawn from the non-working prisoners too weak or injured for slave labor. A month later, rations for working captives, already reduced, were lowered again. Between September and February, about 2 million Soviet prisoners had died, mostly from starvation. It is, in a way, a paradox that because the grand granaries of Ukraine and southern Russia had fallen far short of Germany's expectations, those 2 million Soviet prisoners, as well as, of course, Jews and other nationals, ended up paying the hefty price. The shortage of wheat, coupled with the pressure of war and propaganda, resulted in monstrous behavior and decisions that led to an unimaginable human tragedy. Every time I read a book or article about the Armenian genocide, the Holocaust, the Cambodian genocide, the Rwandan genocide, or any other, I struggle to comprehend or believe the atrocities humans are capable of committing. Moving forward, after World War II, Europe faced severe food shortages and economic devastation. So in 1948, the United States initiated a Marshall Plan, or officially the European Recovery Program, to provide financial aid and resources to rebuild war-torn Europe. Wheat played a crucial role in this recovery effort. The United States, with its surplus wheat production, shipped large quantities of wheat to Europe to alleviate food shortages and stabilize economies. This influx of wheat helped prevent famine, supported economic recovery, and strengthened political stability in Western Europe. In other words, in the years of the Cold War, the Marshall Plan not only facilitated economic recovery, but also helped to counter the spread of communism by stabilizing the region, feeding the nations, and promoting democratic governance. And I can see why the United States was so keen to provide Europe with wheat. Just think about not so distant past, particularly the Arab Spring of 2010-2012. The Arab Spring was a wave of anti-government protests and uprisings across the Arab world, partially fueled by rising food prices, including wheat. Global economic conditions and regional droughts drove up the cost of wheat, increasing living expenses and worsening existing economic and social conditions. In Tunisia, high bread prices were one of the sparks for protests that led to the government's overthrow. A similar pattern occurred in Egypt, where rising food costs contributed to the unrest that fueled the revolution. The Arab Spring, in many ways, underscored how fluctuations in wheat prices and food security can impact political stability and trigger major social and political changes. In recent years, the world has closely followed the disputes surrounding Ukrainian grain exports, which have had a global impact. Both Russia and Ukraine are major wheat exporters, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 severely disrupted Ukrainian grain exports. This disruption has had significant implications for global wheat markets. How? Ukraine, known as the breadbasket of Europe, faced severe disruptions in planting, harvesting, and exporting wheat due to the conflict. Russia, another major wheat exporter, faced economic sanctions that affected its trade. The disruption in wheat supplies led to increased global wheat prices and heightened concerns about food shortages. Almost immediately, the global wheat market felt the shockwaves, with prices increasing from $7.7 per bushel to $13 per bushel. To make matters worse, for over 4 months, Russian military vessels blocked Ukrainian ports in the Black Sea. This move interrupted the flow of Ukrainian wheat. Ukraine, I should remind, exports wheat to countries in the Middle East, North Africa, Asia, and Europe. Between July 2022 and July 2023, a glimmer of hope emerged in the form of the Black Sea Grain Initiative. The initiative was orchestrated by the United Nations in collaboration with Turkey and Russia. It established a safe maritime humanitarian corridor in the Black Sea. This allowed over 1,000 ships loaded with grain and other foodstuff to depart from Ukrainian ports, including Chernomorsk, Odessa, and Yuzhny. However, in July 2023, Russia withdrew from the initiative, citing concerns over its own agricultural exports. This move effectively shut down the safe corridor, renewing disruptions in Ukrainian grain exports and sparking fears of worsening global food security and price volatility. Countries, especially in Eastern Europe, that rely heavily on Ukrainian and Russian wheat were hit hard. Recognizing Ukraine's importance, the European Union set up alternative routes to help Ukraine continue exporting its agricultural products. Also, Ukraine was and continues to be a major supplier for the World Food Programme, which aids over 115 million people in more than 120 countries. Thus, the war in Ukraine and the resulting food shortages have impacted global markets, with the most vulnerable population paying the highest price for a conflict far from their homes. Overall, as the war drags on, disruptions in Ukrainian grain exports threatens to push global hunger to near famine levels, endangering the lives of about 400 million people globally. So, keeping Ukrainian grain flowing is vital for both regional and global food security. Aside from Russia and Ukraine, there are many other big wheat exporting countries, including Australia, United States, France, Germany, Canada, Argentina, India, and Kazakhstan. And key importers of wheat are Egypt, Indonesia, Turkey, China, and various countries in the Middle East and North Africa region. And as we have witnessed in Russia-Ukrainian case, wheat export routes are critical for global food security, connecting major producers to consumers worldwide. Controlling these routes has real consequences for hundreds of millions of people, often driving conflicts and alliances. So the future of the wheat trade at the moment is uncertain. And this uncertainty is not just due to major wheat exporting nations being embroiled in conflicts. There are other challenges contributing to this uncertainty. The global population is expected to continue to grow, which will put increasing pressure on the world's food supply. Climate change is also a major threat to the wheat trade, as it can lead to droughts, floods, and other extreme weather events that can damage wheat crops. But my hope is that technological advancement, precision agriculture, and genetic modification may offer hope in navigating these challenges and shaping the future of the wheat trade. After all, the wheat trade is likely to remain an important part of the global economy for decades and centuries to come. This was World in Me project with Dr. Eva Alexanian. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to press the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos. Stay tuned for our next video, and I'll see you soon.